Hey everybody, welcome to Factually. I'm Adam Conover. I'm delighted to have you with me on the show again because today we're talking about Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is one of the most powerful people in America, but a lot of Americans still don't know his name because he is also one of the shadowiest power players in America. And on top of that, he's also one of the most terrifying. Thiel is the billionaire co-founder of PayPal, and he's also a key intellectual architect of techno-fascism. And I know that seems like a strong term, but that is what we have to call it. It's this widespread belief among first venture capitalists in Silicon Valley and now people at the highest echelons of our government that they, the people in charge of the tech industry, should rule over us instead of we, the people, governing ourselves via democracy. This is a real transformation that is happening in America right now via the tech industry and our government, and Peter Thiel's fingerprints are all over it. Let's start at the top. Thiel employed J.D. Vance at his investment fund fresh out of law school and then bankrolled Vance's Senate campaign. J.D. Vance is quite literally Peter Thiel's creation. And he's not the only Thiel guy in government. Employees of PayPal, Thiel's investment funds, his data mining surveillance company Palantir, which has huge contracts with the federal government, and his multi-billion-dollar defense company Anduril populate the federal government. Thiel guys are in DOJ, at the Department of Defense, the Department of Health and Human Services, and in the White House. And even beyond the government, Thiel has also had an extreme impact on our culture. You know how the Trump administration has been going to war with the very concept of free speech lately? Well, Thiel was ahead of the curve on that. After being outed by the Gawker blog Valleywag in 2007, Thiel secretly funded a lawsuit by the wrestler Hulk Hogan against the entire company. And this lawsuit was so damaging, it led to Gawker and all of its associated blogs filing for bankruptcy. And you know, he's not just content to attack and shut down entire journalism outfits, he wants to attack the entire industry. In 2011, Thiel griped about the totalitarianism of political correctness in media and academia. So the Trump administration's, whole attacks against the free press and the universities themselves are his dream coming true. Maybe that's why he helped bankroll the entire Trump campaign. And it turns out that being a paranoid Christian techno-fascist is good for business because despite his alleged libertarian leanings, Thiel's company's close ties with the government have helped increase his net worth by nearly $9 billion in the last year. But, Thiel is still a shadowy figure. He doesn't want people to know who he is and what he does. So I think we need to ask, who is this guy? And what the fuck is he doing to our country? What kind of power does he have? And what kind of country is he trying to create? Well, to dive into that today, we have an incredible expert on the show. He's written a literal book on Thiel and everything that he doesn't want you to know about him. And we're going to get into that on this week's episode. Before we do, I want to remind you that if you want to support this show, you can do so on Patreon. Head to patreon.com/Adam Conover. $5 a month gets you every episode of the show ad-free. You can also join our online community. We would love to have you. And of course, if you'd like to come see me do stand-up comedy on the road, be in person, laugh with some of your fellow human beings and take a load off. Doesn't that sound nice right about now? Well, coming up soon, December 4th, I'll be in DC. December 5th through 6th, I'll be in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And you know what? We're adding new shows all the time. So by the time this comes out, there might be new ones already added. Head to adamconover.net for all those tickets and tour dates. And now, let's get to this week's episode about Peter Thiel. Max Chafkin is a reporter at Bloomberg Business Week and the author of The Contrarian, Peter Thiel and Silicon Valley's Pursuit of Power. He is so well equipped to talk to us about this mysterious figure and all the terrifying changes he is trying to make to America. Please welcome Max Chafkin. Hey, Max, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Let's jump into it. Who the fuck is Peter Thiel? Why do I keep hearing his name? What kind of power and influence does this man have, and where did he get it?
All right. Peter Thiel is probably one of the most important venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, like one of the key investors who has helped build many of the tech companies that people have heard of. He was probably most famously the first investor in Facebook, basically the first person to really see in Mark Zuckerberg something other than, a guy who had gotten thrown out of Harvard. He's co-founded Palantir, the data mining company. He was a key investor in SpaceX, Elon Musk's rocket company. And it sort of goes on and on. He's like one of the main tech guys. And that's where I kind of started paying attention to him. I am a technology journalist. I write about tech for Bloomberg and Business Week. And I really think like all of that stuff would have been enough to justify a book if not for the fact that, starting in 2016, when he endorsed Donald Trump, he became this major player in Republican politics, as well as a major player in the tech industry. He was basically the first business guy to get behind Trump, donated a bunch of money. He also kind of helped create JD Vance's political career. So he's this like super well-connected investor. His investment group is called the PayPal Mafia, which relates to the fact that he co-founded this company called PayPal. So he's got this thing called the PayPal Mafia. They kind of work together to help each other and start companies and so on. And he's also got kind of his own like little conservative mafia, which kind of comprises a bunch of the folks who are now becoming very, very influential in Washington. JD Vance, most importantly, but also kind of Elon Musk, kind of David Sachs, who's another Trump advisor, and so a bunch of these figures. He's this figure of power and mystery in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I mean, he's got this reputation as being a sort of like almost shadowy puppet master figure. You always see his name pop up of, oh, look at this organization. Behind it actually is Peter Thiel, right? That he's sort of working behind the sidelines, putting his money in strategically in order to push the country in a particular direction. Is that correct? And what direction is that?
So yes, he's like a puppet master, like you said. I think kind of in some corners of the left or whatever, they see him kind of as like almost like a supervillain. Like the way that people sometimes on the right talk about George Soros or something, they talk about Peter Thiel that way. In terms of like shadowy stuff, the thing I probably should have mentioned earlier but didn't is that he secretly funded the destruction of Gawker Media, essentially because he was mad at them for an article that they published. Sorry,
this is the first time I heard of him. Was he maliciously destroyed those companies in response to them outing him as a gay man, or at least publishing the fact that he was a gay man. I think they would have argued that he was actually out. They just like reported on it.
I mean, they said the story from Gawker at the time, and if you talk to some of the people who were involved in that, as I did when I was writing my book, like they said, well, it was kind of an open secret. It's not like people like at his venture capital firm didn't know he was gay. I think from a kind of the way we talk about outing, they outed him. There's a difference between people in your family, your close friends, knowing, your sexuality versus like the whole world knowing it. And so, yeah, he was mad about that. And, there are obviously different ways that one could try to address a grievance. And the way he did it was secretly funding Hulk Hogan's lawsuit. So it's like, it goes really deep into weird lore and stuff, but Hulk Hogan had a separate beef with Gawker over the publication of a sex tape. He sued them, and Thiel basically paid his legal bills and pushed the case forward in an attempt essentially to bankrupt Gawker and to exact punishment on the editor of Gawker, Nick Denton. And he succeeded. I mean, he succeeded wildly. They indeed went bankrupt. Denton went bankrupt. And that became like a calling card for him, especially like within conservative circles. He showed up at the RNC in 2016, shortly after he had revealed himself to be the guy behind the Gawker stuff. And like the way that Republicans saw him then was as this kind of like right-wing crusader, a guy who was sort of taking it to the libs, and who was also behind all these important companies, and who was a supporter of Donald Trump.
So what is his ideology, and where does he get it from?
So his ideology, I mean, it's similar to Trump in a lot of ways. Like he favors restrictions on immigration. He kind of helped pioneer some of the things that we think of as like right-wing culture wars. So like this fixation on the right with sort of like wokeness and everything, which has become like a really big deal. Thiel kind of pioneered that when he was a college student, and he started like a conservative in the 80s. Had a different at the time. Instead of saying woke, they were saying like political correctness, but basically meaning the same thing. But I think all of that is probably like less important to his ideology than what he believes about sort of tech companies and the role of like tech guys in our society.
Mhm.
And that ideology is basically like, to put it bluntly, like these tech guys should be able to do whatever they want, whenever they want. And that
Mhm.
allowing tech companies essentially complete free reign to bend the rules, even break the rules, to collect data, to disregard environmental regulations, like all of that. That is how we as a society will move forward. Like that is how he considers like the essentially the source of progress. And any forces kind of pushing back in that are dangerous in his mind. And I think, and that, I mean, you can see that in a lot of tech companies that have developed since then. And I think like I said, he's this kind of like father figure of the entire tech industry. And
Yeah.
that belief is so important in so many of these companies and so many of these founders that people will have heard of, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and so on.
Where does that belief come from? Because look, I know it's endemic in Silicon Valley that, technology is the way of the future. You don't want to get in the way of technology. And you can make an argument for that, science and engineering are human progress. We want those to advance. Those are high values. We want to be able to let those people do what they do, right? I would agree with that about science generally, that science should be largely unfettered. Engineering is a different thing, but, you could sort of make that argument. But like, this guy's a money guy. You know what I mean? Like he's the venture capitalist. Why does he consider venture capitalists like him to be exceptional to such a degree that like he should be calling the shots? What's the basis for such a belief?
I mean, I think so. First of all, like, I think what you're saying is totally true. Like, and most people agree with it, right? Like, society should not try to deliberately hold back scientists. It also shouldn't try to deliberately hold back, business people who are trying to employ people. Like, I think most people basically agree with that, no matter what your politics are. But like, it starts to get complicated, obviously, once whatever it is you're doing starts to like infringe on others. He came of age. So like I said, his career is fascinating. He went to Stanford. He gets super involved in conservative politics. He starts this kind of like conservative political group at Stanford University around a newspaper called the Stanford Review. There were a lot of these cropping up in the 80s and 90s. Like Ann Coulter started one. I think she was at Cornell. And with similar funding and doing kind of similar stuff. And he sort of pivots this kind of trolling campus conservative movement into a tech company, which is PayPal. And a lot of the guys from who he knew from the Stanford Review get involved with PayPal. And at PayPal, for people who like don't remember or whatever, like it started as a way, most people think of it as like, oh, it's how you buy stuff on eBay, which is how it started. Or it's like how you split the tab, right? And now we have Venmo and things like it. It's how you split the tab, how you send money to a friend. Thiel saw PayPal as having like a revolutionary possibility, like as a way to take the power of money away from governments and banks and so on. And early on, we've sort of gone through this with crypto, where like you had all these crypto entrepreneurs, and they were essentially like breaking the normal rules, but they're saying like, hey, this is the future. You just got to kind of go with this. And that all played out in the 90s with PayPal, where there were like lots of states who were trying to crack down on PayPal because it wasn't because it was really great for money launderers, and they weren't like doing that much to stop it. Just like crypto today. There were gambling rules, and people were using it to gamble. People were like using it to do things that are either illegal or like not allowed.
Sure. I mean, we have hundreds of years of laws and regulations around banks because banks have very often hurt people. They've resulted in financial crises, or they've aided and abetted criminal enterprises or whatever. There's all these rules. Yeah. And PayPal is another one, a standard Silicon Valley. Hey, we are not a bank. We're just a way to store and send money digitally.
Exactly.
Like through a ledger, which of course is a bank, but because they argue there's something else, they're exempt from all those regulations. So of course they immediately start being used for all those harmful things. this is exactly, it's a pattern we see over and over again with tech companies.
Yeah, and I think, and like sort of following this playbook, basically like ignoring rules and just like getting users as quickly as you can. Like back, it's hard to forget like what was going on back then, and the numbers all seem so small. Like all these companies, like PayPal sold for a little more than $1 billion, which sounds like nothing today. Like Elon Musk is worth $400 billion, but it was a lot of money back then. And anyway, they had a lot of success by basically following this playbook. And that kind of turned into how he thought business should be done. And it kind of merged with some of the existing kind of right-wing ideology that was part of who he was. Like he's a fan of Ayn Rand. Like some of this stuff is just like normal libertarianism, normal conservatism, and it kind of merges with Silicon Valley and this sense that like you can like hypercharge change by being on the internet and by like getting a lot of users quickly, and maybe it involves money, maybe it involves communication, but that you can kind of like change the world very quickly and very quickly like dump existing institutions by essentially following this playbook, by just doing it. And you see that in Facebook's early years, right? Like Facebook was constantly, like regulators and even consumers were constantly getting mad at Facebook for essentially like violating people's privacy. I don't know if you remember when they like ruined Christmas one year in like the late 2000s, because like they had some new advertising product that would like put what you gave somebody for Christmas in your Facebook feed. So you like you bought something on Amazon, it would show up in your Facebook feed. Anyway,
right.
And there's more. Like that was just like a tiny microcosm, but they're like constantly like putting people in positions that were uncomfortable. And like over a decade, they built up this gigantic social network and became, like I would argue, like the most powerful like media entity the world has ever known. And so same thing with Uber. Uber goes through American cities and basically ignores taxi rules and essentially says like, do something about it. And it was hard for cities to do something about it, and they eventually surrendered. And now Uber has essentially like destroyed the existing like taxi business in many cities. And I think with all those examples, like you can kind of see like they're pros and cons, and like it's like talking about whether a tech company should like play by the rules doesn't matter as much when it's small. When it's a startup, it's like, I think most people like don't think small companies or startups need to like necessarily be as compliant as big ones, but it starts to get kind of crazy once you're talking about, like 9 out of the 10 most valuable companies in the world are tech companies now. And like these, like suddenly you have these big platform companies that are essentially like, running our lives and running our lives with like almost no oversight whatsoever by regulators, like in any country, except maybe in China, where like they have their own big tech companies that kind of run everyone's lives in a way that's like maybe even scarier than these ones. So like it's just like the ideology on a small scale can seem like pretty benign or even attractive, and then on a large scale, it creates all these unintended consequences.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is techno-fascism, is the idea that these technology companies should be the ones in charge of how the government runs, how our society functions. And I'm really struck by the fact that PayPal, you said he founded it with the people from his conservative campus newspaper, that so much of this is the college right-wingers fantasy come to life. And that's directly what the project was. I mean, Ayn Rand is like, laughable because, everybody knows that kid who, wore a suit jacket to class and like was really into Ayn Rand. And then I tried to read Ayn Rand and I was like, this is true. I tried to read Atlas Shrugged. I was like, let me read the book. And I was like, this is one of the worst novels I've ever read. Unreadable, dreck, horrible, garbage. But some people, they get really into it. They also like reading The Lord of the Rings. And then they build their identities around that. And you're like, okay, eventually they'll like join a think tank or whatever. But this guy built an entire tech empire with aspirations to rule over the rest of us. and did it based on the like from that starting point. That was really what it was.
He's first of all, he would not laugh at when you demean Ayn Rand like that. Like those are fighting words to Peter Thiel.
Ayn Rand was such
he remains a big fan.
She's so laughable. Like her entire project. I was a philosophy major. I was interested in philosophy. I was reading about Ayn Rand. I was reading her work. It's puerile. It's garbage for children. And she also created a cult of personality around herself that was like this bizarre, rationalist ethos that resulted in, her like excommunicating her lover who formerly was like the scion of her intellectual empire. I'm sorry. We can't go deep on Ayn Rand, but it's like, it's bizarre to fall in love with as a intellectual project.
Well, you're talking about those guys, right? Those guys at college who were like, wore the suit jacket and yeah, that is Peter Thiel. I mean, and it's not just Peter Thiel in the sense that like, yeah, he was like a college Republican who liked Ayn Rand, but also like that his grievance with how he was treated for being that guy,
right,
became a big motivator for him. And I mean, I think this comes up a lot.
It's my fault for making fun of those kids. That's what you're saying.
I mean, I did talk to a few people who went to college with them who felt, little tiniest bit like they might have created a monster by not, if they had been a little nicer, But the thing that's interesting too is, so, I've been talking about PayPal, and PayPal is actually two companies. There's a company that Peter Thiel had, which was him and his buddies from Stanford, essentially. And mostly these Stanford review guys who had kind of conservative politics and, wanted to take over the world and get rich and all that. But then there was this other tech company that was like literally across the hall from PayPal when it was getting started in 99. And that company was started by Elon Musk. It's called X.com. It was a payments company. And eventually, well, not even eventually, like a year after that, they essentially merged. They were competitors, and Elon Musk and Peter Thiel became business partners. And they renamed it PayPal, and that helped make Elon Musk very rich. It also led to like grievance on Elon Musk's part because Peter Thiel essentially ousted him from the combined company and got rid of the X name. And you can kind of see, X.com, that probably sounds a little bit familiar because like that's the name that Elon used when he bought Twitter. Like that is what Twitter is called now. It's called X.com. And it's like he never got over that, that like grievance or whatever. But so Thiel and Elon, they are like kind of frenemies or whatever. They're sort of rivals, but they have over the years invested in one another's companies. I mentioned SpaceX, Elon Musk's rocket company. Thiel basically saved that from failing in at around the time of the financial crisis. Like Elon had a couple of rockets explode, and Peter essentially gave him like $30 million. I believe it was $30 million, and helped keep the company alive essentially until it had a successful launch. And when you look at what Elon Musk did during the 2024 election, helping to get Trump elected a second time, it's basically like the Thiel playbook, except done on this like mega scale, like 300 times as much money. And, just this like all the things that Thiel was doing, but like way bolder, not in the shadows, which is how Thiel likes to do it, but like in your face.
Folks, going on the internet is like taking a walk through a big field of snow. As much as you might try to avoid it, you end up leaving big honking footprints everywhere you go. All kinds of your personal data, including email addresses, phone numbers, names of relatives, exist out there on the internet just waiting to be grabbed by anyone looking to exploit you. And that is why I simply have to recommend Delete Me, a service I've been using for years and actually truly believe it. I literally used this service before they ever advertised on the show, and I rely on it to keep me and my loved ones safe. Because right now, there are people out there who are making a living off of trading your and my personal info. They're called data brokers, and they're pawning off our names, addresses, and other personal info to anyone who is willing to cough up the cash. And I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that sounds like something you'd really rather not be a part of. So you really need to check out Delete Me. Their teams of experts diligently hunt down your personal info, remove it from the internet, and keep it gone, keeping you and your loved ones safe from bad actors. As the world gets more wired, there's been an uptick in online harassment, identity theft, and yes, even real-life stalking, all because of this easily accessible information. So why take the risk? You, your family, and your loved ones deserve to feel safe from this kind of invasion of privacy. So check out Delete Me, not just for your security, but for your friends and family too. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/Adam and use promo code Adam at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/Adam, promo code Adam. Folks, it is outerwear season, and the only thing I love more than showing off my gams in warm weather is getting decked out in a chilly winter wardrobe. Ooh, lucky for me, Chubbies has certified winter-proof jackets, sweatshirts, quarter zips, full zips, flannels, and even a freaking full-body puffer jacket. Let me repeat that. A full body puffer jacket. I could really use that in New York City where I am right now. Can you hear it in my voice? I'm a little bit chilly. Yeah, I think you can. And Chubby's stuff would really help me out with that problem. As the temps drop and the weather gets grim, their flannels, pullovers, and quarter zips keep you warm, stylish, and ready for anything. From freezing your tail off at the football game, to crushing donuts at the pumpkin patch, to holding court around the bonfire. And as someone who grew up on the East Coast, I hate it when people tell me LA doesn't have real winters, okay? Those temperatures drop in the evening, the overnights will chill you to the bone, and I have loved that I can depend on my Chubby's flannel overshirt as a first line of defense against a frigid night without sacrificing style. Chubby's will have something for you no matter how cold your winters get, and did I mention, once again, full body puffer jacket. And get this, for a limited time, Chubby's is giving our listeners 20% off your purchase at Chubby's with the promo code Factually at checkout. But if it's Black Friday, skip the code and take advantage of even bigger markdowns during their exclusive Black Friday sale. Just head to chubbyshorts.com, make sure to support our show, and tell them we sent you. That's chubbyshorts.com.
Well, and speaking of Elon is famously from South Africa. Thiel spent time in South Africa, I understand. How might that have informed whatever views he may have on race and multiculturalism? I'm curious. And what are his views on that?
I'm always hesitant to put too much into this because when Thiel, well, let me start with Thiel first. He lived in South Africa when he was in grade school, essentially. He spent, a couple years between South Africa and what was then known as Southwest Africa, it's modern day Namibia. At the time, Namibia, like South Africa, was an apartheid state. And his dad was in the mining industry. His dad worked at uranium mines. And when he lived in Namibia, when he was in grade school, basically, near a uranium mine where his father worked. Now, if you know anything about the history of apartheid in South Africa, you'll know that there's pretty much no way to be more complicit in apartheid than to work at a uranium mine. Because not only is a uranium mine using labor and taking advantage of the inequities of the apartheid system, but the whole reason South Africa was mining uranium at that point was because they wanted to have a nuclear weapon so that they could defend, so that they wouldn't be forced by the United States to give up their system of apartheid.
Jesus Christ, I actually didn't know that.
And
South Africa was trying to build a nuclear weapon so that they could maintain their racist apartheid state in the face of other countries being hey, that's racist.
Yeah, they were worried that it's the threat of sanctions and basically that the international order was going to come down on them and put them in a position where they'd have to give it up. So that's what they were doing. And, this happens in this is kind of like Iran developing a nuclear weapon or whatever. If you're a pariah state and you want to keep going on being a pariah state, doesn't hurt to have a nuclear weapon. So,
and I just want to for those who don't remember, I just want to make this vivid. And the reason they were a pariah state is because it was a country in Africa in which a small number of white people ruled over a very large, much larger black population, which is one of the great historical crimes of the 20th century that went on for so long.
Yeah, and absolutely. And so Thiel comes from that milieu, but not in the same way as Elon Musk, who actually is South African. But I think that, but he did like have a connection to it, and he gets to Stanford. He's in the United States. He's actually born in Germany. He spent most of his childhood in the United States. Like he doesn't speak with an accent. I mean, he is American in every way. But he does have this kind of connection to South Africa and to apartheid. And what was happening in the 1980s when he was in college is that a lot of the kind of like left wing activism was focused on apartheid. And it was, and like you had all these like, idealistic young people essentially like protesting, calling for boycotts. I mean, it's honestly a little bit like the time we live in, right now, except instead of Gaza, like your typical college student is outraged by apartheid, is trying to pressure the administration to do things. And I think,
and rightly so in both cases, in my view.
And Thiel, I think, took this personally, not like, the same way that like because like he had, and I don't mean this to excuse somebody's like racial politics or whatever, but I think if you're 18 years old and you come from like a specific place and like left wingers are like talking about this thing that's like kind of connected to you, it's easy to see how somebody would process that as like some kind of aggression or whatever. So, and now I'm just speculating, but like what I know is like from talking to people who went to school with him, that he would get into these like arguments with people in college. Now, Thiel has denied this part that I'm going to say, but like would sometimes argue, for instance, that like apartheid was actually a good system. It's like a good economic system, kind of like, not trying to, not saying that the racism was right, but kind of like the ends justify the means type, kind of libertarian. So, and saying this to like his black classmates and so on. Again, he's denied this. I'll just leave it there. But I do think that like some of the political grievance has to do with that connection to South Africa. And again, processing sort of like left-wing political movements as like a personal attack. He saw it as a personal attack. And it's like,
so you're saying that all of the borderline indentured servants in my dad's uranium mine were being abused. You know what? I think you might like working in the uranium mine. These are the conversations he was having, not according to him, but according to other folks.
but in that general in that general direction. And like I want to be careful here because like people are not responsible for they're not responsible for where they came from. They're not responsible for their parents' politics. There are lots of people who who like didn't live in South Africa but have similar politics. But you do see this South African background shows up in a handful of these like prominent tech folks. At
some point in your life, though, you do become responsible, right? You're not responsible for your background, but some people who come from that background, they go, "Oh my God, that was horrible." When they hit 24, or when they're in college and they meet some other people and their horizons are broadened.
Yeah,
that didn't happen for him.
And what I'll say is like I don't think Thiel has never expressed overt racism or overt sexism, but there are lots of ways where where his politics feel kind of compatible with some of the more you know what I'm saying, like so just
coded racism and sexism.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely what his critics would say. I mean, I'm not gonna. I don't want to pass judgment. But I think like it's you look at his like inner circle. It's all white guys. It's all guys. It's all white guys. You look at like the inner circle of all these guys. Like you look at Doge. Those pictures of the like Doge, the Doge roundtable, Elon Musk's like group on Fox News, like. What do you see about all those guys? Like they're all basically the same age. They all are white or mostly white. They're all dudes. And Thiel has talked a lot about like the West. Musk does this as well, right? Like we got to defend the West. Like what does that mean? Like, because you're not explicitly saying we need to defend white culture, but it's like very hard. It's very hard to, but you're also not making
that's what it
space
means. That's what it means. I mean, I'll take the baby step and make the final leap. That is what when people say we need to protect Western culture, they're saying white culture That's what they mean by that. When someone says political correctness and wokeness have gone too far, they're arguing against the racial justice movements in America that of the past 50 years that tried to end racism and create a slightly more equal society. Like, that's what these movements are. And what they have done over the past 50 is they don't overtly say we're racist. They code it. This is the world that we're living in. He's part of that movement. It's pretty straightforward to me. Like it's a racist movement, regardless of whether or not he wants to use that language.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting to me is like Thiel. I mean, we can go deeper into this, but like during the 2016 election, that was when when we had the rise of the alt-right, and you had all these like trolling guys saying essentially like racist, sexist stuff. And Thiel Thiel kind of sometimes supported those guys. He was friendly with those guys. He didn't cast them out. He in some cases gave them money. But he never explicitly endorsed that stuff. It's all kind of coded, and like you said, what's different about Musk is like he's not only talking to those guys, but he's in some cases like just saying the same things, like repeating the great replacement conspiracy theory or whatever. Like I spent all this time trying to figure out like what Thiel's relationship was with like Richard Spencer, who was this he's like a neo-Nazi, and like, Spencer, I think what I wrote in the book is that's like Spencer tried to meet with him, but he didn't want to meet with him. Like he drew the line at there. And then like Musk buys Twitter and just like brings Richard Spencer and every other Nazi essentially right back to the platform. Like this thing that had been kind of happening quietly and in the shadows that I had been chasing for so long and like looking for these like hidden connections. It's all out in the open now. It's crazy. It's the experience for me having watched this for like 10 years is just, it's strange.
Yeah. I mean, that's been the story of the last year and a half is people who are doing things secretly are now just doing them in public, whether that's the, Trump administration just being specifically corrupt as possible, the events of the last week as we record this, where, you just have the FCC commissioner just shut, threatening stations because of political speech he doesn't like. You have whatever. It has been a moment where people have felt comfortable taking the mask off because they realize there's no consequence. But still, Thiel has operated a lot in the shadows since then.
That's he has not fully gone all in. I should say, like he kind of, I mean, he's definitely close to JD Vance. He's an ally of JD Vance. Like you don't have Vice President JD Vance without Peter Thiel for sure. But he has not wanted to get as close to this stuff as some of these other tech guys. Like he's not, these dinners where they're all kind of like lining up, trying to like give Trump a gift or like ask him, hey, how much money do you want me to say I'm investing in American data centers? And Trump says like 500 million. They're like, oh, okay, 500 billion. Like Thiel's not a part of that. Thiel's kind of trying, I think, to protect himself from some of this stuff because I think there's risk for this is another topic, but I think there's risk for these tech guys of being so closely associated with what's happening in Washington right now.
Well, or is it rather that Thiel is in charge, so he doesn't need to go bow and scrape? Like Tim Cook is not part of the movement, and so Tim Cook has to go kiss the ring to pay, obedience. But like Thiel fucking made it happen. Like Trump is gonna kiss Peter Thiel's ring, if anything, the other way around. I mean, maybe that's overstating it. But like Peter Thiel doesn't need to beg and plead. He's like, he can just call the guy on the phone. They're friends.
I would rather be Peter Thiel right now than Tim Cook for sure. And because like you said, he's got all this power. He's behind the scenes. He doesn't have to, like you said, he doesn't have to flatter Trump. I mean, there's risk on both sides. Like, Trump has at times tried to hurt Peter Thiel. There's a congressional candidate, Blake Masters, who ran in Arizona for Senate on this like very far right platform. And basically he lost his election narrowly in 2022. And after Thiel got sideways with Trump, Masters was just like cast out. Like he hasn't been able, he's not, you would think he would be in the Trump administration. Now he's not in the Trump administration. Trump endorsed his rival. So like there is potential for blowback if Thiel gets sideways with Trump. But like you said, he's in a position where he's like a behind the scenes player and he doesn't have to, present Trump with a like golden plaque or whatever Tim Cook did.
So I guess I'm wondering, like, what would he be worried about? You said, oh, he doesn't want to be too closely associated, but he's known to have fueled the movement, to have been, he spoke on stage at the RNC. He's like seen as this, shadowy figure behind the throne. Who could he possibly be afraid of at this point?
I mean, voters, I think. I mean, Trump is president today, and he has, kind of low approval ratings, and like, but who's going to be president in, 3 years is it? Hopefully, that the American democracy continues.
And Thiel is part of the attempt to remove that democracy, right?
I think. And Thiel has business interests, like all these guys. So Thiel is still the largest shareholder in Palantir. Palantir is a major government contractor. The Trump administration has been very, very good to Palantir. Thiel's net worth has soared because Palantir has been able to do such great business with the U.S. government. So like he has things to gain, and he's also like. I wrote about this in the book. I think these risks are less significant, but like. He has been worried for a long time over like things like the tax treatment of his wealth. He had kind of squirreled most of his net worth into an IRA. An IRA is like normally a thing for like middle class people to like, put away a couple $100,000 to like
less. I mean, we did a whole episode about this actually because ProPublica did a big story on it. Because I have a Roth IRA and I was limited to while I was putting money into it, $5,000 a year. That's all you could put in. And so it never actually, for the average person, grows that large. I did it for a couple of years. It's got like 20 grand in it or whatever, right? But he used some mechanism, and part of the reason it's limited is because the proceeds are all tax-free at the end. He used some mechanism to make his worth millions and millions of dollars. This vehicle that was intended for
tens of
people.
Millions, I think, or maybe even more now. He managed to put shares of PayPal, and I can't remember the mechanics. It's been a while since I looked at this, and I spent a lot of time with it. But essentially, he put shares in private companies in the IRA, which like you can technically do, but there are lots of reasons why doing so could be a violation of the tax code, because it's like, and this gets really complicated, but like, how do you say how much that is worth? Like, and so, it's anyway, basically like he's on the very edge of what is like acceptable from a tax policy point of view. And so there had been this fear for years that like some president, like this stuff is allowed, this stuff hasn't gotten the IRS mad today, but like some president in the future could essentially cause the IRS to like audit him or change the tax policy and cause him to pay taxes on this like gigantic nest egg. And so like there's some things like that as well, where like his, you don't generally want to make an enemy of the president of the United States. And then the other thing I'll say is like, Trump is, and I think Thiel has been really smart about this, and some of Trump's other allies like have not understood this, most notably Musk. Like, if you get into bed with Trump, like he's a very savvy negotiator and he's the president, and it's going to be very hard to get the better of that interaction. Like we've seen like one after another kind of like moderate guy attempt to like sort of like profit from or contain or whatever. And often like it doesn't go well because like Trump will find a way to use it to his advantage and essentially leave that person like with a shattered career, or like now known, like, I don't know, maybe Musk will be able to recover from this, but like he is now associated with like the most unpopular part of a really unpopular presidency. He's the guy who's like, if you're waiting on hold with the Social Security office for 8 hours, like there's one, you're not going to blame Trump. Maybe you're going to blame like this guy, Elon Musk, who went around like with a chainsaw and bragging about like all the people he was firing. Like, and so I think like Thiel being this like savvy behind the scenes guy has figured out a way to kind of associate with the Trump movement while like minimizing the blowback from that association. And like this was like a big factor like in the period when Biden was president. Now like all of Trump's old friends are like, back in power. So we'll see. But like there's a risk of like getting too closely associated with someone who is as polarizing as Trump, even if you are like a member of the far right or whatever.
I see. Yeah, in the way in which Musk torched so many of his own businesses by doing it so publicly and making himself a magnet, Thiel is just a little under the surface and not as public a person and doesn't quite attract the same amount of heat. However, these company names have become famous as these sort of like behind the scenes boogeymen. You mentioned Palantir. What the fuck is Palantir exactly? Like, what actual service do they sell?
That's a good question.
Does anybody know what this?
They're like a data management company. They're a company that helps you like make sense of your data, whether that data is having to do with like troop movements or something. That was the beginning of the company or whether it has to do with like national security. You're trying to track like criminal cartels or something, or you're just trying to track, like how many like cars are in your factory or something. Like they do a pretty good business with companies. It's like database software, and they claim that the database software has some like AI swirled in. So like the AI will tell you like where the bad guys are if you're like in the military or police, or it'll tell you like which stores are most likely to run out of cars. It's actually like weirdly there's lots of software like this, but Palantir has kind of adopted like very different branding. Like most companies like don't like to be compared to Big Brother. Palantir like goes out of its way to be like, yeah, we're Big Brother and it's great. Like that's kind of like their branding. And that's like part of the reason why it's become this kind of just like boogeyman for people. And both in this country and also like overseas, like in the UK, where they have a big contract to manage the NHS, the National Health Service. Like lots of people in the UK are like really mad about this. They see this like shadowy Silicon Valley tech company like potentially messing up this thing that they really care about, the National Health Service. Now, I'll say also, so like some of this is just like their branding. Like Thiel is really good at making people think that he's like really powerful, and Palantir acts like their software can like, will like do anything or whatever. But there are real concerns. There are like reasons to be afraid of data management software, and especially data management software if the company is either presenting itself as one that's like willing to go over the line, or if it's associated with a philosophy that's all about breaking the rules. Like I'll just to put this in like super simple and obvious terms, and most people probably know this, but like if you like somebody doesn't necessarily have to be like listening to every phone call that I'm having to know a lot about me. They can look at my purchase history. They can look at my movements. They can like use all this data and essentially paint a picture that then would violate my privacy. And like that is the concern with Palantir. And frankly, like with any of these Silicon Valley companies that have elements of surveillance or surveillance capitalism, it's true about Facebook too. If you like take like all of someone's data, you will know things about them that they don't want you to know. The government will have information, and not only will the government have that information, but if that information could then fall into somebody else's hands, whether that's information about your sexuality or who you're dating, or or how many, or whether you're pregnant, whether you've had cancer, like stuff that like actually that is either would be dangerous if people knew about it, or it could be financially harmful or whatever. So like there are like real they're like real concerns about data mining, and that's what Palantir is doing. It's data mining.
They're doing like deep data mining of whatever database you give them, I assume, if you contract with them. But they are willing to do things that like other firms might not do.
And at least in the past, like that's what my reporting on, like, when I was reporting this book, talked to many people who work there or familiar with it, users and so on. And yeah, like that's the long track record. It's also kind of how the company presents itself.
Look at the name of the company. I mean, the company, talk about these fucking college dorks. It's named the Palantir. It's named after the Palantir from J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, which, as you might remember from the film and the books, it is a sphere that I believe Pippin touches, and the character, or is it Merry? Which one is it, Merry or Pippin?
I can't remember whether it's Pippin or Merry, but
it's Pippin. It's Pippin. I remember the books. It's Pippin.
But it's it's like Sauron's way of seeing the world.
Sauron, the Dark Lord, created the Palantir in the books. When you touch it, you can see things that are far away. It gives you, supernatural knowledge. But when you use it, it comes at a price because Sauron can see you, and it also kind of drives you mad, right? You are seen by the creator of it, which is like, so it's an evil thing. Like the Palantir is evil, and you're not supposed to use it. It's bad. And so the fact that they are presenting it that way, I mean, I don't think it's like, oh, they didn't realize it was bad. I think it's part of the branding, right? It's like, no,
100%.
We're giving you the thing you should not have.
That is 100% right. And like, it's so important because all the time I see, first of all, they're doing this on purpose. Alex Karp, the CEO, we'll talk about their technology in just this way. It'll be like, our technology can be used to kill people. We have to keep it very safe. Like, it's like this way. It's like saying like, we have this scary thing. And a lot of the times I see people who are like activists or who oppose Palantir or oppose surveillance capitalism or whatever. They sometimes like buy into this and they don't realize like it's branding. They think if they say like, Peter Thiel is building like a modern day Big Brother or whatever. Like you think you're criticizing him, but what you're really doing is just marketing because the people who buy his technology do not care. They're not like, oh, I don't want to buy, like you think like the CIA is like, I don't want to buy I don't want to buy Sauron's orb. That sounds evil. They'd be like, yeah, definitely give me Sauron's orb. Like Bank of America is not gonna be, I don't want Sauron's orb. Like they want Sauron's orb. Everyone does. It's like brilliant branding. And
there's this misunderstanding that people have where there's the famous tweet about the sci-fi author who writes a book called "Do Not Build the Torment Nexus," and then a tech guy reads it and goes, "Oh, I'll build the Torment Nexus." But the premise of that tweet is that the tech guy didn't realize, they didn't actually get the lesson. You're not supposed to build the thing. No. The tech guy read the book and said, yeah, well, I don't want to be in the Torment Nexus, but I'd love to be the guy who runs the Torment Nexus. Like they read it and they go, good. Some people read 1984 and says, sure sounds good to be Big Brother.
Exactly.
What if I become Big Brother? Then I wouldn't have any complaints.
So this comes up a lot with AI, right? Like you see these AI companies, it's like really popular among the guys selling AI to talk about how their software like might end the world. And Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, is always like constantly like comparing it to the nuclear bomb and like suggesting that like somehow Elon Musk does this all the time too. Like somehow like this large language model is gonna like destroy human civilization. Like there are a lot of people who believe that, and then I think there are a bunch of people who use it for marketing because like it's a lot easier to market a product if you're like this could be all powerful. It might be the most powerful thing the universe has ever seen, and it kind of distracts people from the ways in which this stuff just doesn't work. Like it's hard to like if you're constantly worrying about the robots that are going to like take over the world, you may not notice that big companies are putting these robots that like don't work and using them to like replace humans and like and causing people to lose jobs and causing like our Google search results to suffer and like our world to be like a shittier place. And
you
so
just summarized the argument I've been making for the last 2 years on this podcast much more succinctly than I ever have. So thank you. That's exactly my position, that like, oh, I'm supposed to, the idea that, AI is going to destroy the world is a feint to distract me from the fact that, I literally had a friend fired from their job to be replaced with a shitty ass chatbot.
Yeah. 100 and Palantir was like the first company to do this. Like they were like comparing themselves to Big Brother in like 2008, 2009, like trying to basically the same kind of strategy. And I'm not saying there aren't things to be scared of, and it's same thing with AI. There are things to worry about. They're just often not they're not like the things that the companies are talking about.
So I think this is again part of mask off culture, because the guy is just saying, hey, I'm Big Brother. I'm making an evil product and I'm marketing it to evil people. And if you're evil, sign up and give me some money. Like, I mean, it kind of boils down to that to a certain extent, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, on some level, like as a journalist and like, journalists, we can be like, I don't know, like sociopathic or something sometimes, because like, you want a good story and like and like when people are entertaining, it's like you want to write about them. But, like to me, there's something almost refreshing about someone like Thiel, who like most of these, like most CEOs like do go to such lengths to like pretend to be like good guys, and something refreshing about somebody who just plays the heel. And like he's a professional wrestling fan. Like he loves to talk about like like,
is that why he helped Hulk Hogan?
I think he may be a professional wrestling fan because he helped Hulk Hogan. I don't know, but like he's dressed up as Hogan at parties. Like he's like he talks about kayfabe all the time. And like, right now God. He's giving this lecture.
This is the word. He's an Ayn Rand fan and a wrestling fan. This is so embarrassing. Like an adult wrestling fan. Well, it's so embarrassing, man. And to think that he like saw the Hulk Hogan sex tape and he was like, I'm interested. Now I'm in. Let me see this guy's past work. Like, what a fucking dork. Move on. He's giving a lecture right now about the Antichrist. It's like a 4-part lecture series where Peter Thiel, he presents himself as an intellectual. The talks are off the record. There are these huge lines in front of I think it's the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco. And a lot of people have been like cracking jokes about this. Like there was a Joe Rogan clip going around like a week ago where Tim Dillon and Joe Rogan are saying like, I don't think he knows what he's doing. Like because like he's the most antichristy guy in the world. Like giving a lecture on the Antichrist just seems like to invite like a joke. And it's like, yeah, that's the point. He's playing the heel. He's doing what he's like always done, which is like, try to be a little edgy and also, it puts him in this position as this like provocateur, this like genius, this puppet master. And again, like not anywhere near like a lot of the stuff that's happening in Washington that, is probably not great to be associated with. He is a Christian, right? He speaking of the Antichrist, does that play a role in his ideology and actions?
He's a Christian, although, man, his Christianity is unconventional. Like I
cannot wait to find out how.
I mean, he's just it almost seems like he's interested in Christianity, like from an intellectual standpoint. His parents were evangelical. I think he like saw his Christianity in his background. Again, getting back to that sense of like, of being like a victim or something in this world. There's so much grievance on the right, and Thiel's been a part of that. Like this sense that like the world is against conservatives and Christians and white guys. And so I think it plays a role there, but also now like for him and for a lot of people on the right in tech, it's just like a way, it's like another club to be in that allows them to like stick it to the left or something. I don't know, like you can Thiel's like done these like lectures about theology and stuff. I mean, he seems to be skeptical of the idea of of like many ideas, including like God's love and things that like Christians
Oh, love. Who believes in that?
That like most Christians seem to there's a Ross, I never know how to say his name, but there's
Dowtat?
there's a long exchange with Ross, I'm forgetting his name. Ross Dowtat over like Christianity. And by the end of it, Ross just seems like, befuddled because like because like Thiel's understanding of Christianity is like just so far away from like what a normie Christian's idea of God and Jesus and so on is. I mean, these Antichrist lectures, like the whole point of them basically is that Greta Thunberg, the diminutive Swedish environmental activist, that she is the Antichrist, or like that, or that someone like her is the Antichrist.
Imagine you're like waiting in this long line in San Francisco. Oh, I can't wait to get into the Peter Thiel lecture, find out who the Antichrist is. You're like waiting. 5 hours later, it's like Greta Thunberg. You're like, what? Oh man, what a
I hate to spoil it for people, but it's and I don't know. There's he's only done one lecture, and just to be clear, I have not seen it. I don't know what's in it for sure.
Oh, I'm sure he's so scared of Greta Thunberg, the autistic child from Sweden who refuses to fly in planes.
But the reason, but he's scared of her because she is somebody who's saying like, hey, like businesses need to be reined in. Like she's talking about it in terms of like climate change and so on. But I think like in a weird way, like I think he's right. Like I think she is actually sort of dangerous to his worldview and to like the worldview of some people who like think that like, that like ultra libertarianism is the key, that like, so I mean, it's hilarious because again, she's like, I don't know, 4'11" or something. I've never met her in person, but she's not a large woman. And like, again, like you said, like her main thing seems to be like not flying in planes. So
and the peak of her fame was like 5 or 6 years ago. Like it's and God bless Greta, but yeah, like okay, it's just sorry, go on, please.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. It's people who are trying to rein in technology companies, either because they're going to say that we need to have a carbon tax, or we need to find some way to discourage tech companies from, or not tech companies, like all companies from polluting so much. Or like there are other versions of this. There are efforts underway now to regulate, tech companies' access to data, or access to children's data, or like AI's use in hiring decisions, or things like that. So it's like the risk that we like democracy, that like the voters would get together and like make some rules that would rein him in.
But so if his fear of the Antichrist is that he would be reined in, that would make him the Christ. Like in this analysis, that like the worst thing that could happen would be for his progress to be slowed down, which means he really it sounds like he believes pretty deeply in his own messianic destiny in some way. And we haven't even talked about seasteading yet, and like that kind of thing. Like this guy he really believes some out there shit, right?
Yeah. So seasteading, this is the idea. It's like a homestead, but it's on the water, but it's the idea that like you would have these like floating islands with no rules at all, and that his idea was that this would be a way to be able to do essentially things that you wouldn't be allowed to do on in a country. For instance, types of scientific research. So like there are all these laws, around experimenting on humans, or like, I mean, I don't quite know what he's imagining, as well as like experimentation with like medicines and stuff. He's really interested in the idea that like people should be able to like, like we shouldn't need an FDA. You should just like do your own research, I guess, like for all drugs. And
so he just wants to create what, the island of Dr. Moreau? Like he just wants an island in the middle of the ocean so he can start like sewing pigs to children's backs or whatever, and like giving them experimental drugs he comes up with.
I don't know anything about the pigs on the children's backs, but there is this whole, he does have this whole interest.
I really like how you disavow my jokes. You're like, well, I cannot actually speak to
But you know
the pigs on the backs, but it's not in my reporting. However, I will say, I'm just giving you a hard time. Please continue.
No. Well, he does have a thing about parabiosis, and what parabiosis is essentially sewing an old mouse to a young mouse.
Okay.
And the idea, there have been some kind of weird, kooky, like Island of Dr. Moreau type experiments around essentially transfusing blood from a young person to an old person, or a young mouse to an old mouse. And there's like a tiny bit of science. And Thiel, I think no one really knows like how far he went. He has said that he was interested in the research, but he like never. I think he said he's what he said is he's not a vampire. I don't know if that means.
I'm sorry. He has said he's not a vampire.
Yeah, joking, but so
in answer to what question? What exactly was he trying to dispel? What's the context in which one says I'm not a vampire?
The question of whether, if you've seen Silicon Valley, I don't know if you've seen the Blood Boy episode of Silicon Valley, but the idea that there have been reports of Silicon Valley guys, and there actually is one guy now, Brian
Thompson, I think.
I forget his last name.
Johnson.
Brian Johnson.
Like,
who's like doing this? Who's got? I think he's been transfusing his sons. Like he has a younger son.
And he keeps getting articles written about him because he looks so weird in the photos. Like every magazine is like, let's take more photos of this guy. He looks like such a freak that he's got the penis of an 18-year-old. Yeah, that's this famous dude. Yes.
Anyway, Thiel has kind of like put money into all sorts of weird either science stuff or political stuff, including seasteading and including some research into this thing called parabiosis, which is the sewing the two mice together.
Right. And so his interest in seasteading is like he wants a zone free of regulation where he wants to create his own techno-fascist country. He wants to create a country.
I think it's like wanting to have no rules apply to you. So to be able to do whatever you want. And
to create a state, like he wants to be the state.
There's some. So I don't know that he's explicitly said that, but certainly his followers have said like that very thing. Like there's this idea of the network state and like that we're going to essentially use, and he's definitely a fan and has promoted all sorts of like kind of essays and philosophy around like what you're saying, like kind of creating a like techno-libertarian state outside of the United States. It's kind of weird given that he started a major defense contractor, and like it's kind of surprising, like so much of this stuff could undermine the US government. And you might think that the US government at some point would say like, do we really want to like buy software from somebody whose like philosophy, is that we should like have a currency that allows, that makes it harder for the US to regulate money laundering, or that, whatever, all this stuff sometimes like starts to feel like it's against the interests of US policymakers. But I don't know. Everyone's just sort of gone along with it so far.
Well, the top US policymakers are now people who he got elected. So like, I don't think they'd have a problem with that. Not currently, but he's also specifically spoken out against democracy as a form of government, has he not?
Yeah. I was kind of hinting at that before, but yes, he's basically said that he doesn't believe in democracy. And there's a super famous essay that he wrote called The Education of a Libertarian. And it's about how he used to be a libertarian, but he no longer is. And his complaint is essentially that like people are going to rein you in, that you can't have a democracy because like all the stuff you do. And the most controversial thing in this is he essentially says that giving women the right to vote made libertarianism impossible. Now he walked some of this stuff back.
Because libertarians are always men.
Everyone knows that.
No, sorry, that's a joke. Please continue.
No, yeah, no. I mean, but that like that, so it kind of boils down to this thing where like you can't trust the masses or something. You can't trust, you can't trust normal people to decide what they want. And like that is, I mean, like there are versions of this that are more mild and that maybe are like, we don't live in a direct democracy. We live in a republic. As you know, like, you know, the Senate is not really democratic.
Of course, yeah, sure.
Wyoming gets so like there are ways in which, you know, people like everyone makes compromises around democracy. But yeah, Thiel has definitely gone much further where he is.
He doesn't believe that people should have self-governance. Like
No.
pretty plain and simple.
No. And when you look at some of the people in his orbit, like they go to some pretty radical places. Like there's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who's like closely connected to Thiel,
Right.
and who, you know, Vance is friends with, you know, who talks about the need for an American Caesar, you know, like explicitly talking about the need for a dictator, a benevolent dictator. And Thiel in his own way has talked about that. You know, he's talked about how the best companies are run by CEOs, and like you need a CEO, like and that kind of comes up in some of these like in some of the new right ideology where like their ideal ruler would be like the kind of guy who runs a tech company, which is kind of funny because it's like basically it's like you said about Christ a minute ago. It's like, yeah, it's just Peter Thiel. We just put Peter Thiel in charge, or Elon Musk or somebody like him.
Yeah, I mean, this is when at the very beginning of this episode, I said that Peter Thiel is a techno-fascist, and this is why that's not an exaggeration. I mean, it's literally the case, is he believes that people who run technology companies should rule the rest of us, and that the rest of us should not, in fact, have self-governance. He wants to create his own nation with which would be a new kind of state, but it seems like in the meantime, while he works on his island building technology, he is trying to reform or transform the United States government to be no longer democratic, no longer people self-governing themselves, but to be run by people like him. I mean, I'm not a guy who talks about the founding fathers, you know, with a huge amount of reverence because they were just people. I think he probably agrees. I think he probably feels he knows better than them and wants to refound America on a new set of principles, among which are not democracy, where people like him get to call the shots. And he's currently probably the most powerful billionaire behind the people currently running our government. Does any of that sound off base to you? Because it sounds pretty dark to me.
I feel like I have to say, I mean, I feel like I have to say that seasteading has gone out of style. And like, there are no seasteads. And the reason there are no seasteads, I mean, there are a couple of reasons. I think they tried one and it kind of didn't work. But like one of the reasons is because they've actually been able to achieve many of these things in the United States. You know, like you don't need a seastead. I mean, you know, with between like crypto and like and the way that, you know, members of this kind of ideological persuasion have taken over parts of government. Like, I'm not sure that there's much demand for seasteads. The actual seasteading movement has kind of transitioned into I forget what they're called, but essentially trying to do a seastead like in some third world country where like you would convince the government that like to just let us have a little piece of the country where we like where there are no rules. There's one of these in I think it's in Honduras, but in any case, like the movement has completely lost steam because they don't need the movement anymore. Like like they've taken over to some extent. And so like these kind of like wacky, you know, ideas are almost like not totally necessary.
So, you know, I really appreciate you being on this show because I can hear as you talk, you're really trying hard as a reporter to be fair and to be unbiased is the wrong word, but, you know, to be sort of even and not, you know, I'm a little bit of a polemicist. I'm a comedian. You're trying to stick to the facts here. You're a mainstream reporter. You're covering him as an interesting subject. You know, you're not really coming at it from a political vantage point or to warn us. You're just reporting what this guy is up to. And what you're reporting is that he does not believe in democracy. He does not believe in self-governance, the self-governance of the people. He wants America to be ruled by a techno-dictator. And he is embedded at the highest levels of our government, is the right-hand man to the people currently running the country, and is also the most sort of canny and crafty of all these billionaires who are currently exerting themselves this way. And that's just what's fucking happening. Like, that's like not, that's not like an argument. Hey, here's the way to look at it. That's just like, these are the facts on the ground.
Yeah, dude, that's what I'm saying.
Jesus fucking Christ, Max. Why are you why are you losing your mind? But why are you not screaming from the rooftops about this? You're not doing anything wrong, but I'm like, what the fuck? What the fuck is happening in this country?
Well,
Sorry.
I appreciate that you recognize my, even-handedness, and I really did, like, in the book. And I have tried to appreciate like Thiel and to take him on his own terms and give credit where due and talk to people like, I've had many conversations with people who really admire him and care about him and so on. But I think that like taking a clear-eyed view at these tech oligarchs is like the first step. Like if you're upset by what's happening like in the United States or people who are upset about specific things, like whether it's like tech companies and kids or anything, I just think like taking that clear eye view is actually as a good step, and it's empowering. And like and I feel like I know that many people have like given up on democracy and stuff, but like I haven't given up on democracy, and that's like why I'm not like you asked me why I'm not panicking or whatever. It's because I think that people I think that there's a reason Thiel regards democracy as a threat to some of his projects, and it's because democracy is like powerful, and it's still powerful, no matter what Trump says about like Jimmy Kimmel or anything else. Like it's like it maybe I'm saying that because it's a nice thing to believe, but I feel like, but in the position that I'm in, like it's kind of like the only thing I believe, and it's the only reason to like keep doing, like what I'm doing.
Yeah. So I really appreciate that. Maybe it does make sense that he considers Greta Thunberg the Antichrist, because Greta Thunberg is, a symbol.
She is the Antichrist.
she's a small, she's a small person. She's just one person with a voice, mobilizing lots of people. And so he's still afraid of the sleeping giant of the people rising up and snatching the crown off his head. I mean, you know more about him than almost anybody, I would have to say, I would guess. So being that he is in such a position of power, I want to end by asking you, like, does he have a weakness? Like, how do we take him down? Is there a vent we can shoot a little bomb into,
Well, this I don't know about that, but I mean he has lots of weaknesses, like all these guys do. Thiel's weakness is that, so the title of my book is The Contrarian. Like it's kind of how he approaches the world. It's how a lot of venture capitalists approach the world. It's like, hey, if the crowd thinks one thing, I'm going to think the other. And I, honestly, like part of why like I gravitated like to the subject matter is like I feel this impulse sometimes, like, but like contrarianism by itself is just like it kind of gets close to nihilism, and so like if you don't have like strongly held beliefs, if you're just trying to like zig when everybody else zags, if you don't have like a kind of strong sort of foundation, like in terms of your intellectual beliefs or your moral beliefs or whatever, like that is dangerous, and it can lead you to weird place. It can cause you to make mistakes that you wouldn't otherwise make. And like that is, and I'm not saying like, he has a moral foundation, but like he's also like somebody who really wants to be in this kind of like weird smart guy position of outthinking, and sometimes like that can get you into trouble. So like he's made mistakes in business, and they're all the, I mean, I'm like gonna shift to Musk for a second, but like, ego and like these guys have big egos, and they think they're really smart, and at the end of the day they're just people, and that's that's they're not as big as they see themselves, and they're not as big as we see them. They're just like Greta.
There we go. And there's more of us than there are of them if we can rouse ourselves. Max, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. This has been a really fantastic conversation. And the name of the book is The Contrarian. People can, of course, get a copy at our special bookshop, factuallypod.com/books. Every book you buy there will support not just this show, but your local bookstore as well. And where can people find your work online if they want to follow what else you're up to?
I am on Twitter at Chafkin.
It's not what it's called, Max.
I know.
It's not what it's called. You said the name earlier. It's called what?
It's got x.com.
Thank you very much.
I'm on Blue Sky at the same username. And publishing at Bloomberg.com. I also have a podcast called Everybody's Business. It's every week. And would love if people check that out too.
Check it out. Max Chafkin, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Adam, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you once again to Max Chafkin for coming on the show. Of course, if you want to pick up a copy of his book, once again, factuallypod.com/books. If you want to support the show directly, you can do so on Patreon. $5 a month, every episode ad-free. $15 a month, I'll read your name in the credits. This week, I want to thank Oros Harmon, Dylan Roy, Jake, Callan, Hey Look a Distraction, Uber Elder, and Navarro Eggburger. If you'd like me to read your name or silly username at the end of the show, head to patreon.com/Adam Conover, and we'd love to have you. Of course, if you want to come see me on the road, head to adamconover.net. I'd love to see you out there on the road. I'd like to thank my producers, Sam Nonman and Tony Wilson, everybody here at HeadGum for making the show possible. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time on Factually.
That was a HeadGum podcast.